Louisiana's Commissioner of Administration. Mr. Jay Dardenne is here. Mr. Jay, welcome back to Keel. Thanks for taking time for us today.
Hey, good morning, Robert, Aaron. How y'all doing?
Good. A busy weekend. Let's start here with the governor's announcement. What was that motivation? What was the final? Because he said about a week ago, we're not considering a statewide mandate. Obviously, at the time, was he close to a tipping point? What made him rethink and go with the Saturday announcement?
I know that he had his eyes on what was happening across the state ever since we went to phase 2 and keeping an eye on things to make sure we were moving in the right direction. And it became apparent we weren't moving in the right direction. We had fallen to, I think, number 10 in the nation in terms of number of cases or pro rata cases. And all of a sudden we're back to number 3, right behind New York and New Jersey, and going in the wrong direction with hospitalizations and with numbers of cases across the state. And that is what prompted the decision that he very reluctantly made to impose a statewide masking, whereas previously been left up to localities to decide. But we just, unfortunately, are going in the wrong direction, which is very concerning as we move closer to the start of school and closer to football season and closer to the point where we thought we'd be headed in the right direction.
You know, Mr. Jay, and I know you know what I'm talking about, when you see there is such an inundation of contradictory information, medical information. Do the governor's medical advisors, do they tell him that hospitalization is up because of coronavirus and that the death rate is up because of coronavirus? Because I've seen just the opposite.
Well, they tell him that when it's accurate or when it's happening, and there have been situations, obviously, where hospitalizations went up. The problem is cases are going up, and as we've said all along, and I think everybody knows, a lot of people are walking around asymptomatic. They have the coronavirus, but they're not showing symptoms because, for whatever reason, physiologically they're not affected by it. But nonetheless, they can still transmit it, and that's what's happening. And you're seeing obviously a spike in cases, and you're seeing a scary spike in young people in particular. And then those young people are very prone to give it to older people, to parents, to grandparents, or what have you. And so it's just a very alarming situation, really all over the country, but now particularly again in Louisiana.
Let me ask you this, Jay. How is this going to be enforced across the state? Who's watching to see if I wear a mask into Kroger or at Betty Virginia Park or wherever I go?
Nobody except the people in whose stores you visit. And the governor made that very clear. He said, we're not going to enforce our way out of this. We're not going to have people going around looking for people not wearing masks to give them citations or something. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen by stores and places that people visit saying you need to wear a mask when you're in this store. And that's what the governor has said and made clear. And it's going to have to be, that's going to be the only mechanism for real enforcement.
Mr. Jay,
and people recognizing that they need to comply.
Clarify the governor's rule when it comes to churches for us, please.
I think that what I heard him say, and I wasn't at the press conference over the weekend, but what I heard him say was that there was not going to be any enforcement in churches, that they were going to leave it to pastors and ministers and priests to decide within their church how they were going to seat people and how they were going to require people to wear masks. As I believe what he said, he was not going to be any enforcement in churches.
Now, help me out with, there's an ordinance on our city council agenda this week that has some tighter mask rules. Tighter restrictions are allowed, correct?
That's correct.
Just not looser restrictions.
That's right.
Okay. So what Shreveport does is what Shreveport does with regard to children. They want children age 2 and above to wear masks. The governor is starting at age 8, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Jay, when the governor's looking at this, what kind of numbers are he and or his advisors looking for to sort of back this up a little bit? What kind of results, what kind of changes in the stats do you need to say, okay, we can loosen the rules a little bit?
Well, I don't think there's a hard number. You can't point to an X number of case reduction that would trigger it. Just like what prompted this new decision to take place was the 2-week period that we've been looking at, where there was a dramatic rise in the number of cases and increased hospitalizations in certain areas spiking, like particularly in Southwest Louisiana. So there's no hard number that you can point to. It's just you're looking for trends. You're looking for where we are in hospital capacity, where you are in number of cases, and it's a number of cases that's spiked so dramatically. Excuse me, this cause a concern.
Jay, the governor's order also orders bars to close again. This is probably, I know you all have said this, it's probably going to cost some of these businesses. They're going to probably go under. You guys realize that, I guess, right?
Well, certainly everybody realized that. The governor realized that and very reluctantly made that decision. But the contact tracing was indicating that bars were a main culprit of where particularly young people were contracting, or who had coronavirus and were spreading it. The contact tracing went back to bars, and that's why that decision was made. And I know it was made very reluctantly, but I also know that it's very difficult to be able to make bars a safe place. The very nature of a bar is that you stand around, you drink, you talk to people, you talk loudly because often there's music. You know, you're not seated or socially distanced, and it just makes it very difficult to believe that bars are going to be a safe place. And when you start seeing signs of contact tracing indicating this is where people contracted the disease, that's what prompted the decision to close bars again. And it was a very reluctant one, I know that.